On July 18, 1915, an act of state legislature provided for an appointment of a building commission of 5 citizens to search for land not less than 500 acres west of the Alleghenies to establish a hospital for the mentally ill in western Pennsylvania. The hospital was to be called Western State Hospital for the Insane. In those days, the hospital was largely self-sustaining, with patients and staff operating a full-fledged farm on the hospital property. Throughout the history of the hospital, and when we look at our timeline, just some incredible changes have gone on toward the help and support of patients with mental illnesses. The face of mental health treatment has changed significantly over the years to include a focus on recovery, community reintegration, and consumer-driven services. Torrance State Hospital is part of a continuum of services offered to individuals transitioning through their recovery journey. In 1916, the Building Commission chose the Westmoreland County area and procured farmland located on the present location of the hospital. Torrance State Hospital opened its doors on November 25, 1919, when 5 patients were transferred from Danville State Hospital, beginning a century of uninterrupted service to the community. On August 14, 1923, the name of the hospital was changed from Western State Hospital for the Insane to Torrance State Hospital in honor of Francis J. Torrance, chairman of the hospital's original building commission. Pennsylvania's first Mental Health Act was approved on July 11, 1923. The act established uniform admission, commitment, and discharge procedures and codified all acts since 1845. Also, the act revised mental health terminology, substituting the term mental illness for other terms when referring to patients. Treatment focus at the hospital in the early years was based primarily on providing stable housing for the patients. The lack of community mental health care necessitated the admission of many patients to the hospital that in modern day would not even be considered. Individuals suffering from epilepsy, intellectual disabilities, and other physical limitations were often hospitalized in the hospital for extended periods of time. During this period, there was a significant lack of psychotropic medications, and treatment provided was essentially structured living, work therapy through the farm and other employment opportunities, in addition to the intermittent use of other treatments such as hydrotherapy and electroconvulsive shock therapy.
Mental illness is it's all chemistry. There was a resident on Bystro had been, she was very little and she had dark hair, and she was in a room for 10 years, but she was out in and out of the bathroom and everything. She was like but the neighbor kept the door, but she liked that room, she liked the room. But no medicine seemed to be helpful with her. And then they came out with Millerilla. Oh my goodness. She just like that, and she gained weight, and she went down to work, and I guess she went home then. I mean, it just was, she went with some of her relatives, maybe her parents wasn't living. And that seems to be, whenever, if the patients, couldn't get out, if they just basically, if their parents died, it was very hard for them. So whenever the Mental Health Act comes, when it knocked over a judge to consider you you're incapacitated, that's whenever if 8 patients went down to the doctor's office and something, the social worker now had to put about maybe 7 fine places for them. So it was a big change, and they were not ready for the change in the outside. The housing and they should have had day and night hospitals like they have in New York, that they alternate, that the linens is changed, because the people get sick every place. Everybody has troubles.
My name is Donna Dansko. I worked at Torrance for 35 years. I worked in nursing, and I worked in almost every building on the grounds. I also lived on the grounds.
You said you lived on ground since you were around 9 years old.
We moved here when I was 9 years old, and the grounds have sure changed.
So why did you live on grounds?
My father was groundskeeper in Florist, and my mother was an LPN up here. So when the groundskeeper had left, they asked my dad if he would come up here and live on the grounds and be the groundskeeper, and he said yes. We lived on the old Ryan farm, which was below the sewage plant past the Kraft building. It was like a mile away from the main road.
So how many years did you work here, Frank?
I worked for 35 years here. Good times. Those are good times.
So what departments were you assigned to work while employed at Torrance, and what were some of your responsibilities or your jobs?
Well, I started out as a laborer when I first started working here, and our job was to do all the lawn work, and we we moved stuff in the buildings when they needed stuff, and we used furniture down to the upholstery shop and brought the new stuff back up, the reupholstered stuff, the wooden stuff back up to the buildings. And that's among other things. We emptied buildings as they transferred. We would transfer all the belongings from one building to the other, all manual labor. There wasn't, we might be lucky to have a cart or something, but lots of times we would stay after 4 o'clock till 6 o'clock at night doing this. Okay, so.
I'm Louise Jones, and I started to work here in 1956. Miss Fagan was the directress of nursing. I was hired, and over the weekend, I got a pain behind my ears, and I went over to see Dr. Rowley in Blairsville, and to my surprise, I had the chicken pox. I was getting it, and I got coded for it, and I called up and she said, "Oh my goodness, just say wait till you're all clear." But that was my introduction to Torrance. I worked here 30 years till I retired, and it was a wonderful job. I enjoyed it. The longer I worked, the more I enjoyed it, and it was a wonderful experience. I worked in many buildings. I became an LPN at age 40. I was a medicine aide then, and I went into the third class of the LPN class here. There was five classes that Mrs. Galetta had, and she had enough LPNs, so they were registered or they were licensed, and so her part of the work for the hospital was completed at that time.
My name is Joe Shikowski. I work here at Torrance State Hospital. I started on June the 26th, 1967. I worked from June 26, 67 to April 10, 68 when I was called to go to the military. I left for the military April 10, 68. I was gone for like 2 years, 4 months. I came back to helm my job here at Torrance. I came back to August the 12th, 1970.
What was your title there?
My title was I was a dairy worker 1. And I stayed down the farm from 70 to 76. When the hospital closed the farm in April 2nd, 1976, I didn't pick a job out, so they picked one out for me. They put me in the laundry. I stayed in the laundry from uh, April 76 till the year 2002. Then when the hospital closed the laundry, they put me on a ground crew. So they put me on a ground crew. I still just recently had my title changed. I was a laundry worker one. Then they permanently to laundry washman. Then just about 2 years ago they changed my title to semi-skilled laborer.
My name's Mary Ellen Miller, and I lived here on the grounds between 1945 and 1965. I never worked here, but I lived on the grounds because my dad worked here. A number of the positions here, you had to be residents on the ground so that you were close if an emergency came. So the doctors lived here, the dentist, the head electrician, my dad maintenance engineer, and the farm managers all lived on the grounds. So that's how I ended up here.
In 1948, with the assistance of the University of Pittsburgh, an affiliate school of psychiatric nursing was established at Torrance State Hospital. Classes began in January of 1948 with student nurses from Indiana and Conemaugh hospitals.
Well, when I first started working here, they were building the Griezmann building. And that was all a big field behind the Griezmann. I mean, it used to be a hay field what it was. I watched Griezmann go up. And I can't remember that one nurse, but they got all brand new furniture for Griezmann, okay? So I can't remember that nurse, she was really nice, but we had to carry all that furniture. They took it all up to the what's the name of that place where KD is? Storeroom. And we load trucks up and take it down, unload it, and take it to all the rooms. I mean, beds, nightstands, desk, chairs, whatever, everything. And it took us a while to do that, you know. I remember when he dedicated that building too, so. And they closed up and died.
At the peeling room, they did food for the doctors. The peeling room is in the basement of where the KD is at now. And we had 24, we still had 3 groups of patients, you know, and we always we always worked in a circle of 3. And we had, with these 24 knives, and we had aprons. We all had aprons. I didn't have a knife. The help didn't have a knife. The residents had the knives, and sometimes they would leave it in their pocket. And when we come to close up, we would be maybe 3, and then we had to go through the aprons, and you would find them, you know. But that was interesting, and we would do big carts of potatoes, and if they wanted them chipped, they were just beautiful in your hand. But the ladies did very good work, you know, it's making little chips, you know, for them. And then when the potatoes would be in there, and the same as with lettuce, then when we had the carrots, we would put the the carrots on top, so it would look pretty for them, you know, the lettuce and the orange carrots. And it took a lot of work there at the KD, but it was a fascinating experience.
We started sending the sheets and the bath towels out in the year 1985. They said we'd still be there like for six weeks later, but we lingered on to the year 2000. We stayed like 17 years later. We finally closed in the year 2002. You know, like we used to work the holidays, or every day we had off in the laundry was on a Sunday. You know, I used to come on the weekends, fill the washers up for me and a couple other boys. We took turns on the weekends coming and pick it. We used to go around every building, pick the laundry up, and take it back and store it and fill the washers up for Monday morning. You know.
That amount of patients back then,
Yeah.
that was probably
Yeah.
a lot of laundry.
Yeah. Years ago, they used to bake bread, pies, and cake and everything else up KD. Now they buy everything. You know.
Could you tell us a little bit about your father and what his job was? And
My dad, yeah, Frank Andre, he was a maintenance engineer here. Before he came here, he worked in Blairsville at the E.H. Porter Company. That's where Citron is now. But during the war, World War II, they made shells for the Navy. So he was a plant manager or something there, because I still have designs of the shells that he made. But at any rate, the war was coming to an end, so he went job hunting, and he ended up here at Torrance. In fact, well, he worked at Diverge, so we, of course, were pretty well acquainted with the folks that worked there. That was the administrative wing that he was in. And then while he was here, he designed that maintenance building, and they moved their offices and down there for the maintenance staff. That was easier for everybody. All the tools and the workers were in one place instead of scattered all over the grounds. All the tools were one place, and lock and key. It was a lot easier to keep track of things down there, besides the fact that they were right beside the powerhouse. And that was, of course, one of his most important adventures, was to keep the powerhouse running, because making power for the grounds, and also the heat came from that power plant, those generators and things. So he was in charge of that, and of course all the maintenance on the ground. I remember him mentioning there were 80-some buildings or structures of one kind or another on the grounds for which he was responsible. So that's a fair number of dwellings and buildings to be responsible for. We were here during the 50s when they put up the new buildings. So I remember making a lot of visits up there to see what had gone on by the day, because that was his responsibility to make sure that the building was proceeding as it was supposed to proceed, and that the drawings were being completed as they were set up. So yeah, he had a lot of things to do out here. And of course then Harrisburg would want a 10-year plan, so that they would know how much money to allot for the institutions. They probably still do that. I don't, yeah. Well, anyway, I can remember those 10-year plans, because to provide for the light, the heat, the food, all the supplies that human beings need for 10 years was just kind of an overwhelming thought, to me anyway. But I was a kid. I can remember the agony of going over those 10-year plans so that the state would know how much money to budget for Torrance. And I didn't even know the details. I knew it was agonizing.
I was a psychiatric aide, and I helped the patients with their daily activities. We did many different things with the patients. We'd take them to doctor's offices. We would take them to their groups if they were to be escorted. We did many things with the patients, like on holidays we would decorate, and we'd have the patients decorating. And we also, I had special permission to do a hygiene class with some of the females that we got, because some of the females didn't even know how to curl their hair, wash their hair. When they came in, they were in sad shape. And we would do that once a week, and after they got used to it, they really enjoyed it. Every week they would ask what I'd bring in new for them, and every week I would bring different things in for them to try. If they were going to go on a visit someplace, all the staff would look to see if they had nice clothes to go, and if they didn't, and they didn't have anything up at the Suit Yourself shop, we'd go home and we'd root through our closets and bring stuff in.
In 1953, the Renner Building was opened as a building to house patients that suffered from tuberculosis. The prevailing treatment at the time was that tubercular patients would benefit from, quote, clean air, unquote, and the hospital built Renner Building to house these individuals since it was the highest point on the hospital grounds. Eventually, these patients were transferred to Mayview State Hospital, and the building was converted to house infirm men and women, in addition to X-ray and a dental clinic. In 1960, we had over 3,000 individuals at the state hospital, and we had 944 employees. In 1963, the Community Mental Health Center Act was established to provide significant community mental health treatment. This coincided with the development of many community services that allowed our patients to be discharged from the hospital and be provided adequate care in their home communities. In 1974, the Pennsylvania Peonage Abolishment Act was enacted in all state hospitals in Pennsylvania. The act stated that patients must work only on a voluntary basis in specifically defined functions of the hospital and must be paid for the work, and the work itself must be therapeutic.
And what about as far as having the patients working on the grounds?
Uh,
Did you witness any of that?
Years ago they did, but recently they don't. They just work down at our greenhouse now. You know.
How much of the farming did they do back then?
They came down to the farm barns and they threw hay off the hay wagon. They went up in a hay mound. They came down, shoveled the manure behind the cows and bedded the cows and cleaned the box stalls out for the calves, and the cows couldn't have calves and all that. You know, threw silage onto the corn, helped to fed the cows and all different things.
Did they have milking cows?
Yes. We had about 120. We had 3 different barns, and we had 40 milking cows in each barn. Then we brought the milk. We had a milk truck. We brought the milk up to KD, and they pasteurized the milk up at KD.
Goodness.
They used to butcher their own beef animals, and they used to take them back to piggery here. They had a slaughterhouse back to piggery. They butchered beef animals, dairy cattle, hogs, and they took all the meat up to KD. We had about 1,000 hogs back here back to piggery. You know.
You hear when the patients worked?
Yes, I was. When they took the work from the patients, I saw a complete downfall with the patients. Patients enjoyed going to the piggery. They went to the piggery, the greenhouse, the dairy barn. Down in the fields they worked. They planted food for the kitchen, and at that time we had a garden down there that they actually went and they worked in it every day. And they would pick the stuff, take it up to KD, they prepare stuff, they helped prepare food up there. Down at the piggery, if the patients were working at the piggery, I used to love it when the patients would come up and they would say, "Oh, the pigs just had piglets. Oh, you ought to see them." I mean, they were just ecstatic about this. They'd go down to the dairy barn, they'd help with the milking, they'd help feed the cows, get the cows out in the field in the morning. And they enjoyed this. We had so many of them, they looked forward to it. We didn't even have to get the patients up in the morning, the ones that worked. They knew they had to be up at a certain time, they would be up at that time. They would be dressed, they would eat their breakfast and out the door. We were late with getting something done, like if we'd have an incident or something and we were a little bit late, patients would say, "You gotta give me my medicine, I've gotta get to work, I'm gonna get fired." They just enjoyed it. And then whenever they took the work away from the patients, they were devastated.
I remember when the beef barn closed down, they had really good beef here. They had people from all over the state, probably from other states come, and we were down there. A guy I was just talking about, his name's Russ Varinger. He was down there, okay, and I went down just to see what was going on. So I had to get back up. My lunch hour was over, the lunch half hour. And I go like this, "See you, Russ." And they pointed to me like I was bidding on a cow. I got out of there in a quick hurry. I don't know if I got the cow or not. Yeah.
All the timing, huh?
Yeah, really. And he see me later today, "Do you realize what you did?" And I says, "Now I realize."
Now, in the wintertime or in the fall, we had, when we were gathering up or picking up the potatoes, the patients liked it outside. They didn't like to be in the dorms. You know, the wards were big. They were, you know, you would have, like Reichert had 200 and some patients, you know, and you had, you know, the ward was big, but they liked to be outside. They enjoyed being outside. And I like being outside too. But on the potato wagon, we got to ride the wagon over to the farm where they had the potatoes at, and they had went through it, and they had the potatoes laying every place. So we had to, you know, we had to pick them up. Well, we had one person that you looked and they would say, "Look, look," and there he would be standing on his handstands. He would take his hand and just stand up. You know, he got up on the roof. You know, he just was. He was, whether he, maybe he was a circus performer at one time, but anyways, they enjoyed life, you know, here too, to the best of their ability. And we picked strawberries and we picked on Saturdays so they could have them. And we would keep the crop going because we got Saturdays. See, we were working 5 days. This was out in the IT group. And you had the guests, and they liked it. But however, whenever you would walk, and that was one of the disadvantages, when you would walk out there in the yard, or the fields, or in the rows of these tomatoes, there would be grease, you know, on the thing from the tractor. You would get that on your uniform. You know, I mean, it would be on the hem of it, you know, so that was, that's the only time we worked on Saturdays, is to get the crops in. But they raised animals here too. They had pigs, and they were different ones that said how clean the pig pens were, you know. They kept them very clean.
But basically, anything they needed done, we did it. You know, we helped on a farm, and, you know, like I said, picking produce. And I'd never forget one time when the piggery was there, all the little piglets had been moved from, must have been from where they were born, into the other side, and there must have been, I know there was 60, 70 of those little piglets, okay? And we had to stand and make a human fence so they wouldn't run away. And it was crazy. I mean, all those little pigs were running across the road. It was funny as hell.
I remember as a kid, we had fenced areas with those really big draft horses here. They pulled the plows and did the plantings with draft horses. And the patients loved to draft. We loved to draft horses. You know, they were penned in, they were huge as percher ones, huge, huge horses. So it wasn't long until the tractors took over. But the patients liked the horses better. I do know that because they were pets. They would come down and pet the horses in the evenings. Everybody fed the horses. Of course, there were a lot of animals out here at the time, and we all loved them. I mean, we used to go to the piggery to pat the pigs for crying out loud. And the chickens, we had chickens. We didn't care for them that much. So. We had ducks as pets in my house because my sister had allergies, so we couldn't have a dog, cat, so we had ducks. So ducks roaming around. It was a little unusual, but it fit in out here. You know, in town, ducks wouldn't fit, but out here, ducks fit. So it was kind of a different community.
The patients, like I said, they were very down whenever they took work from them. They had nothing to do.
And you said that the patients watched the clock.
Yes, and they'd have to go to groups, and a lot of the things, I mean, they were really nice groups, but it wasn't something that they were interested in. They just had no use for the groups. They wanted to be out and be active. They used to take patients to Blairsville for shopping trips, and they just loved that because they had their own money to go and spend.
Yeah, so you took them out shopping in the community.
Mm-hmm.
You said grants.
Art wells. Then they'd go to Isley's to get a snack. And they used to love to bring stuff back for the other patients. They would buy, even if it was a bag of candy, and they would come on units and they would share it with the other patients that were allowed to have it.
In 2003, specifically on August 14, 2003, the Pennsylvania legislature enacted Act 21 that mandated the Department of Human Services to provide mental health and sex offense specific treatment for an identified population that had been adjudicated with certain sex-related crimes. In 2004, the Sexual Responsibility and Treatment Program opened on the campus of Torrance State Hospital. In 2008, specifically on November 13th, 2008, the Regional Forensic Psychiatric Center was transferred from Mayview State Hospital to Torrance State Hospital. When Mayview State Hospital closed in December 31st, 2008, many of their employees transferred to Torrance State Hospital. And while Mayview was able to place the majority of their patients in the community, a few patients were transferred to Torrance State Hospital for further treatment.
And you said one of the patients actually rode the bus to school?
It was he would come down, we rode on our school bus, but he had a bus. He was one of the patients that went to Valtech. They let them go to Valtech. But he was very protective of us. If there was anybody that would stop that we didn't know, he would step out so that the person would see that there was an adult there. And he's a very nice person. After he left here, he worked at the greenhouse under my dad's care up there, and he would, after he left here, he wrote my dad and told my dad that he was glad that he learned how to do stuff at the greenhouse, because he has a second job working at a greenhouse, but he going to school at Valtech, he was also working at a garage. And he asked if anybody was watching the kids at the school bus.
Okay, one of the last jobs that I had before I went back into the buildings, and this was interesting. Mrs. Rojan, she was an aide from Indiana, and she and I was working with a man from New Derry. That was the three, and then we had another man. I don't know what he was an aide, and then we had 2 employees from Wiseman, and they decided that they were going to take, and we were going to go and start to take these people, residents out. They hadn't been out; they had been in the building. So we went on the ward. This was like in the morning to get after they came up from breakfast and they had their medicine to get them ready. So we had between putting shoes and socks and they had a shirt, you know, because this was in the spring, you know, and we had to get them ready to go outside, and they had to be bundled up. And we went down. We were going to go to. It was a job getting because they didn't particularly want to go. You know, they had been having their time there on the day ward or what they were doing in the building, but we were now going to get them used to going outside and doing things. So we went to Sherman Forest, and we were given 24 sickles, you know, to cut grass, to cut highway. Well, then when we get down there, again, we had to come up to Wiseman to the dining area, and that's where we had to eat. In other words, the residents ate. And we had to take the coats off. Then we had to put the coats on and the hats. And then we went back to the Sherwood Forest. But while we were doing this, or I should say, after the dining room, we went back to where the outside of across the road from the cannery, they had some tables and seats and stuff, and we relieved one another there, and the residents were there. They stayed, but we relieved ourselves amongst ourselves for lunch. And then we went down to Sherman's Forest again with the 24 sickles. And that was, that worked for a while. Then they decided we should go up to, it's going now, the old activities building there is right across from the old library. Well, we had, again, it was the hats. You know, some people, they didn't have the long benches up there for them to lay down on. And so the activities that we had to do, coloring, you know, people to draw, we had, the idea was just, we got a bus ride in to go down to Wiseman, you know. And one of the nice things about this thing is the charge, the relief charge. He passed away. What was his wife worked here, Penny? What was her last name? He called every one of those residents by name and always had a little thing to say about the name. But he was wonderful. You know, just check them in. And that we always talked about that. How he was the only one here that he just he really enjoyed his work, you know.
You were never afraid of the patients or anything?
I was not. No. That is strange. I mean, I was always told that I needed to be careful and I needed to stay away from the groups. I needed to make sure somebody knew where I was all the time, and not to go around the patients. But we had patients working in our yard and around our homes, taking care of the grass and planting gardens and things. I was never afraid of them. So I wasn't afraid.
Mhm.
Maybe that's why I was never afraid to teach in 7th grade.
It's worse.
Yeah, yeah, it was.
But I don't know, when I worked in the greenhouse, and, they used to get like a packet of tobacco and papers a week. And I don't know if they still got that or not.
On ground.
Yeah.
Excuse me, on grounds it's smoke free now. But they used to order
Right.
cigarettes for the patients.
Yeah, they used to. In the greenhouse, they had these things, you put the tobacco in and a paper, and you pull them. And in fact,
Like roll your own cigarettes.
yeah, when I was 21, I decided, well, I'm going to start smoking. And one of the patients, I was rolling it. He looked at me and he says, "Do you want me to do that for you, Frank?" And I said, "Yeah, if you want." He says, "You're not doing a very good job." So he rolls it up and, and gives it to me. And I never, hell, he was a friend of mine. What's a little bit of saliva between friends?
Right. You didn't worry about things back
No,
then.
no, it was just,
treatment philosophy has changed over the years to a recovery active treatment model. This model includes specific social rehabilitative services that strives to holistically treat the needs of all consumers. The departments of psychology, social services, therapeutic activities, including vocational paid work experiences, peer support, and spiritual support, all focus on the active treatment rehabilitative process.
This was in the winter of 1957, and I'd only been there a couple months, and one day Mrs. Bennett came around, or she talked to the nurse, Mrs. Barclay, and she said, I'm going to be going on vacation, Miss Nurse Barclay, and she says, this new aide over here, Jones, they call her, she's over there cleaning out those cubicles. And she says, she looks for work. She doesn't have to do that. And so she said she'd be a good one to put down the linen room. So that's how I got assigned to the linen room. But anyways, I was over there with the patient back at the hopper room, and she gets her hot water, and we go back to the linen room. And she goes over to the wall at the corner, and she gets those pull sticks that you have a gadget on the end of it that you can, open the window. Well, she goes up, and the registers in the linen room was all up on the ceiling. And she goes up, and she's looking for something, and she gets a hold of it. She goes bang, bang. She gets a hold of it, and she pulls it over and brings it down, and she has it in a Christmas card box. And she unties that, well, she puts the hook away, and she unties that, and here she has toast. And she says to me, I said, well, you have food in there. And she says, oh, it's only toast, Mrs. Jones. But she says, just because I'm here, I can't, there's no reason I can't have tea and toast at the end of the shift. It was so nice, that she had, because she's there, she can still continue on having tea and toast. That made my day.
You were just telling me when you came here into the building about the peacocks.
Oh yeah, when I was younger, my dad and I would take care of Dr. Bullard's peacocks when he was here.
I heard about that.
And they had up in the garage up there, he had the peacocks stay. Well, they laid some eggs. So peacocks weren't doing anything with them. So upstairs on the third floor here, we made a place to put the eggs, and we had heat lamps on them. And my dad and I would come up, and when Dr. Bullard and his wife weren't home, we'd come up and take care of the peacock eggs. Well, the peacock eggs finally hatched, and they went outside with the mamas and the daddies. But they would actually jump over the fence, and we'd have to chase them. And the patients would see it, and they'd come up and try to help us. The ones that had ground privileges. It was fun. There's a lot of good memories here.
He had those peacocks out. Do you remember that or not?
Yeah.
Well, when he wanted them to take vacation, my boss would always say, hey, Frank, you go make sure you water and feed those peacocks out there, okay? So my brother Tom, he was the foreman down at the boiler house, okay, he's an avid fly fisher, he was then. He says, grab a couple of his feathers out of one of them peacocks and bring them down to you.
Highs and tides.
Yeah, I did. I picked up some that was laying in there, but he didn't like them because they were all over poop and stuff. So
You said you took patients for their shock treatments?
Well, we had to get them, all these sheets and things together, fixed up for them. And when they had the shock treatment, you know, we lie down on the thing, and it basically was out, we were covering them up afterwards, and you fold it up, and you would hold it, you would to secure the side so that they would, when their arms went up, they would be held up, in a long sheet. Sometimes we had to put two over, the resident, so that, if they wet or anything, wouldn't just go all over, But it was, it helped the patients. And then they stopped it.
What was it like to grow up at Torrance State Hospital?
What it was like to grow up here? Well, since I didn't remember any other childhood, I thought this was a pretty normal upbringing here. We had other families on the grounds. The business manager had 4 children. Dr. Schillings had 4 children. The dentist had a daughter on the grounds. The next door neighbor, his daughters were high school age. Catherine Johnson and Merle Johnson, who were farm managers, they had children on the ground. So I just thought it was another kind of community. A lot of our social activities were in Blairsville. We all went to church in Blairsville. And my Girl Scout troop was in Blairsville, and any number of other things. Of course, our library was in Blairsville. We used that a lot for school things. But technically, we were not residents of Blairsville. We were even in another county, but we were very closely connected with everything there. We had our own 4-H club here on the grounds. We had sewing 4-H and cooking 4-H, and the Schilling girls, and Paula Nayland, and a number of the other kids on the grounds, all were in that 4-H club. Catherine Johnson, whose husband was a farm manager, was one of the 4-H leaders. Becky Duval, her husband was a business manager. She was one of the leaders. And Pauline Nayland, and her husband was the dentist. And so they were the leaders of our 4-H club. And we had that for a number of years. We would compete at the Westmoreland County fairgrounds with our sewing and our cooking and whatever else we were doing at the time. So we thought that was kind of normal. We had some activities here on the grounds that people in town really didn't have access to. We had Christmas parties with patients in attendance. We had a symphony orchestra here that was pretty good, as I remember. Violins, French horns, stringed instruments of all kinds. So I think some of the folks here were very talented. We had a number of soloists and singers here. Mrs. Ryder was in charge of that chorus, I believe. Mrs. Ryder lived next door to us, and her husband was a doctor, Dr. Frank Ryder. And so she taught vocal music lessons on her own, and then she had charge of the chorus up here. I do remember having a circus up here several times. I remember having picnics in the grove. And I do remember that the plantings on the grounds were just fabulous. They were just beautiful. There were flowers everywhere, with patients, of course, working those jobs. And so people would come up to the grounds just to look at the plantings that we had on the grounds. But I thought it was normal.
they had, I'll say one thing about patients, they ate good because we used to eat up in the KD, they had employees side, and they had excellent, I remember pork chops, and all this stuff comes from here. they had pork chops and they just melt now, and I can't remember, but it wasn't hardly in, maybe less than 75 cents or 80 cents for almost a 3-course meal, and it was good. You know, I remember doing that. My dad took me up there one time. I didn't go up all the time, but it was sort of a treat to go up there and eat.
Yeah.
And as I said, we couldn't have pets with hair in my house, so one time my dad bought me a goldfish, and we named him Joe. So Joe was my goldfish, and I had him a couple of years, and one day while I was at school, my dad came home and the fish tank was dirty, and he had a few extra minutes, so he decided he'd clean the fish tank, and so I didn't have to do it that evening because I had Girl Scouts that night. So Joe escaped somehow and went down the drain. So my dad turned on the water, and he told my mother not to turn the water off, let the water run down the drain. He went down to the disposal plant, and he had the gentleman down to the disposal plant start the scoops up to keep scoop down and just stir up all the awful stuff down there. And when I got home from school that day, Joe was in the tank, swimming. But Joe had bruises on one side of his little scales. It was like a bluish brown spot there. And so I don't think my dad was going to tell me, but I said, you know, Joe has this mark. Is he dirty? Do we have to wash it for goldfish? Or, you know, it just doesn't look right. So he fessed up and said he let the goldfish go down the drain. But my dad was not going to let me come home to no goldfish.
So whatever.
This
Joe-
is, they had this is one of my awards I got from Don Grimes when they had my 50-year celebration on June 26, 2000. It was 2 years ago. It was 2 years ago. Would I be wrong?
It was June 26, 2017.
Huh?
It was June 26, 2017 is whenever we had the party.
June 26th.
Mm-hmm.
That was my 50 years, 2017. 50 years.
And also, we have this, the Pennsylvania House of Reps sent this to you as an award for being a 50-year state member.
Do you want to read it to them, Will?
You want me to read it?
Yes, but I
Okay.
kept my eyes on. Yeah.
Whereas the House of Representatives of Pennsylvania is always proud to acknowledge those individuals who, through professional excellence, bring great credit to themselves and this Commonwealth. And whereas Joseph Solkowski is being honored upon 50 years of dedicated service to this Commonwealth, and whereas Mr. Solkowski began his career with this Commonwealth in 1967 as a farm labor employee, and he served Torrance State Hospital as a washing machine operator 1 and semi-skilled laborer. His state service was interrupted from April 1968 through August 1970, when he served this country with honor and distinction as a member of the United States Army 4th Infantry Division Artillery, 6th Battalion, 29th Artillery B Battery in Vietnam. Wounded in action, Mr. Sokolsky is the recipient of the Purple Heart. Throughout his career, he has demonstrated remarkable knowledge, ability, and integrity in carrying out his many responsibilities, thus earning the respect and gratitude of all those who receive the benefit of his tireless devotion to duty.
There was never any incidents or
No.
anything like that. It
No.
was just all seemed like it was family type atmosphere
Yeah.
at that time.
And they knew us for being on the grounds. I mean, you know, they trusted us. And let's face it, some of us around here that lived, we treated them like family. It wasn't like they were a bad person, they were sick. So we just treated them as one of ours.
And like you did mention before, that there wasn't as many behavioral problems. You didn't see like the one-to-one,
No,
those types of things
No.
back then.
back then there was very seldom one-to-ones. They were on a unit. If there was a problem, we'd have to separate them for a while and then they'd come back. There wasn't the one-to-one bits. But then back then, like I said, they were the true sick ones, meaning really having physical and mental problems, where the drug and alcohol patients are completely different.
A lot of good memories. I can't really think of any bad ones. I mean, everybody had bad days or something, but we were like bonded, like, you know, it was like one big family and stuff, you know. I don't ever remember getting in trouble. I remember when I started here, my dad, he was in charge of the plumbers. And he got me the job here, and he said, Frank, he says, all you have to do when you go in there, you do what they tell you. If you think it's right or wrong, you do what they, and you'll be okay. So I did that, and I came out okay, you know. So.
What was one of your fondest memories at Torrance?
Well, that's a hard one, because like I said, I thought it was normal, so I had a great childhood as far as I was concerned. You know, I thought it was a really good thing in my life to be in a place where so much service was given to people who were so needy. You know, it was like a built-in mission that we all talk about as Christians. It was just built in. If you wanted to serve, you wanted to do extra things for people who were in need, you had multiple opportunities here. So I just consider it an advantage to live here. I love that out here.
No longer are the days when individuals remain in this level of care for many years of their lives. Our current treatment philosophy includes a focus on mental health stabilization, life skill enhancement, maintaining the individual's community support systems, while striving for eventual community reintegration. Our hope for the future is that this level of care remains only a temporary intervention along the individual's journey of recovery.